dug them up. And at the same time, in Alaska, the U.S. dug up some more that had been lying there under ice, 0 degrees for I don't know how many years. The U.S. dug those up, but the U.S. went one step further. They actually mailed the samples in the mail back to Washington or wherever they sent them. They just went in the mail. So this woman took $85,000 of her own money out of her house, mortgaged it, to go on this expedition. What the heck? Someone got a cell phone in here? Oh, okay. Anyway, she took $85,000 out of her house to dig up this germ. And when I asked her why, I sat through 2 hours. She gave a little lecture here. Only about 10 people came. It was very, very quiet. I think they were all scientists except me. And I said, well, why would you do that? And she said, well, we have to know how it killed people, so that if it happens again, well, no. I said, well, it is going to happen again now, isn't it? You dug them all up, So this is like the bird flu. Do not believe it for one moment, but keep washing your hands. Just normal things. Let's remember that in Victorian times, women were dying in childbirth, wealthy women, all women. As soon as they took the birthing away from the midwives who washed their hands, and they put it into the hospital and said women could not study medicine, women started having their babies with the doctors. They were all dying from infections, and the babies sometimes. And so Semmelweis said to them, don't come straight from a cadaver that you've been dissecting and put your hands into a woman's birth canal. This is what's doing it. Wash your hands when you come from an autopsy. Wash your hands when you come from an infected dead person. They didn't even think of washing their hands. And so you know what they did to him for telling them that? He was hounded to his death, Semmelweis. And so now they're still not washing their hands. In third world countries, 25% of people in hospitals die of infections. And in first world, 10% still die of infections. So, they're still not listening to Semmelweis. So they don't learn. Now here's Iraq. Begins a lockdown ahead of the vote. Oh, that's very democratic. We're going to have a big lockdown. Nobody gets into the country. Nobody gets out until we have this vote. And it's called, this is the sun here, Iraq's new birth. Okay? But this birth is not going to be of a democracy, trust me. So the heavy security foils the violence, high Sunni turnout, all of this, and they're blocking out anybody, the insurgents, in other words, the resistance, because this, I told you before, this election is illegitimate. This is international law. This is UN. Any election held under an occupation is an illegitimate election. The elections in Palestine, same thing. Big joke. So now, this is going to be another US-controlled so-called democracy. Well, there's more chairs down here, folks. If you need chairs, they're right here. And so now, they're going out for constitutional reform in Iraq. Meantime, at the same day, 50 rebels, they're calling them rebels now. They never use the word resistance. It'll never, ever be used. Insurgents, rebels, gunmen, making it illegitimate. So 50 of them killed, cleaning up the place for the big democratic vote. So, and here's a good one. Parliament's assisted suicide debate. We're going to have another one now. They had one about 7 years ago. Is expected to split the parties. So what we have this is about euthanasia. Supposedly, it's going to be a bill about if you request, let me go now, I can't stand it anymore, give me the pill. Or if you can't request it or whatever, you're gaga, your brain isn't functioning. But I'm wondering, like Holland, how far this bill will actually go once it's out there. So keep your eye on this one, because it just says that it would allow anyone to help the terminally ill die, okay? So keep a close watch on this little bit that's coming through, because we could end up like Holland, where if someone is not capable of saying anything, the doctors, here we have our own method. It's the morphine drip. Once you're on the morphine drip, that's it. So anyone, who once they're on the morphine drip, they're going. So remember that. Now, poor old Saddam, he's going to trial as scheduled with a swift execution. In a way, he's sort of like Timothy McVeigh, who came out on TV after 3 months with them in jail saying, "Kill me now, I did it, it's all my fault," even though there was a whole gang of them. So they didn't want him saying anything, and they don't want this guy getting, I told you ages ago, didn't I? They don't want him going to court and telling how for 27 years he worked for the CIA and the Americans, and he didn't gas the Kurds. That was Iranian gas, I'm sorry. And all those bodies they found, that was from the war with Iran. Yes, it was. I have all the papers. So yes, he was just another dictator propped up by the U.S., just as evil as the rest of them. But they're adding on to his crimes so that nobody's going to care that he doesn't blab. He is not going to get a chance to say anything about his affiliation with the Bush family, with the CIA. But there's a couple of things he didn't do, you see. He was supposed to go all the way through. So they said to him in '89, privatize your oil. He said no, because he was a Stalinist. He wanted to keep the oil, don't privatize it. Of course, Stalin was another monster. But anyway, Saddam believed in that social thing. Okay, I'm not going to privatize the oil. Bad, bad, bad. Then he tells them he's going into Kuwait because he's caught Kuwait slant drilling, which he did. And Kuwait, of course, used to belong to Iraq before the British partitioned everything off. So this April Glaspie sits there and she listens to him and she goes, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. He thinks it's okay, he goes into Kuwait. What does he get? The highway of hell. So, no, there were certain things, and then he started changing to euros. Oh, that was the last straw. So he had to go. And the reason, and I told my class years ago, in the first year, 5 years ago, I told them there'd be another invasion of Iraq. I said, that's why they didn't do anything to Saddam in the first invasion. They needed him as an excuse for the second invasion. And I said that in an article in, 1998 or something. And I knew that's what they would do, and that's what they did. Now, with the marijuana, I don't know if anyone's following what they're doing with Mark Emery or what's happening there. But the judge, what's his name again? I can't think of his name. Anyway, he probably is going to hand him over, I would say. Anyway, the marijuana, these are experiments they've done with marijuana-like drug reduces anxiety in rats. Well, why the hell not? It does in people. Anyway, this is what they've discovered. Then another thing they've just discovered about pot is this. Pot actually, now I'm going to read you this. Hippocampuses are the part of the brain responsible for learning and memory. And the study held true for either plant-derived or the synthetic version of cannabinoids, they call them. Now they say this is what happens. Chronic use of marijuana may actually improve learning memory. When the new neurons in the hippocampus can mature in 2 or 3 months. So it actually replaces your neurons. Your memory and your learning gets better. So as an old hippie, I can stand here and say, yes, I think it has. So now this guy here gave the world Valium. Leo Sternbach gave the world Valium. Now, he looks like a happy guy, doesn't he? Gave them Valium. And I had a friend of mine who was on Valium for a few months before she went to the shrink. And I went to visit her one day, and she had 4 walls in the kitchen. She painted them all a different color, and she thought they looked great. The kitchen looked great. She was on this stuff. So she was really happy about that. So now, the other thing that's come out in the now is the organic panic. Did anyone see this? Okay, you can still get the now because it's still out there in some of the bins. It comes out on a Thursday. They've got an excellent article trying to get the now. In the States now, what the companies, the corpo farms want to do, they're pushing for a bill that will allow them to put synthetics into organic food. They want to turn to organics and make the money on it, but they also want to be able to put, I guess, things into the food that'll keep them longer or God knows what, but they're doing a bill, they're pushing a bill through like that now. So we're going to end up now having to go to the supermarket, and instead of seeing a sign saying certified organic, then we're going to have to come out with another label that says, this is really organic, okay? So this is what they're trying now. But they will, it's like Codex. They will keep, they never rest. It's 24 hours a day for them, 24/7. They never rest. Now, this tragedy in Pakistan. Now, I told my class, I guess back in '99 or something, that Pakistan's Supreme Court, and I still have the article, it was a little tiny one, came out with this announcement before any of this happened over there. They said, by 2001, we are going to have an interest-free economy. Now, what they meant was, not only that they're not going to charge exorbitant interest, but that their government probably wouldn't borrow from banks anymore, like ours does. Their government would create their own interest-free money. So I said at the time, what's going to happen over there? And it said in this article that the banking community, the cartel is called the community, was very anxious over this. Pakistan saying this because they would have showed the rest of the world, look, this is how you do it. So anyway, they can't now, of course. And then 2 weeks ago, I heard on the news, very late at night, that Pakistan, the Pakistani government said, we are watching the United States weather wars, unquote. 2 weeks later, okay, we're going to discuss HAARP and the chemtrails tonight. Now, it has been proven that HAARP can instigate. It doesn't do the whole earthquake business, but it can instigate certain things if it is applied to a fault area. It depends on where you apply it. And HAARP being at the top of the globe, and they say it's to find underground bunkers, that electricity, magnetism, the EMFs, whatever you want to call them, that come out of HAARP, when they go into the ground, they're not the same as when they come out. So from the Arctic, they can place one of these EMFs in the ground. But when it comes out on the other end where they have sent it, it has about 10,000 times the power that it had when it first went into the ground. And I also, tonight, whoever wants to sign on, I have from William Thomas from 4 years ago, all of that about the chemtrails, down to the last, what's in them, what they're being used for. I interviewed him 4 years ago. I paid $25 for the book on it, but I can do it for you. I think for $7 I can get it done. So I will have those out at the end for whoever wants to sign on for that, all the information on the chemtrails, so that you can let other people know this is not a figment of anybody's imagination. This is happening. In fact, the people in, is it Osceola near Ottawa there? The Ojibwe Indians went to Ottawa years and years ago and said, stop spraying us, we're all getting sick. That was the first one. They started spraying the natives. So we will be discussing the chemtrails, and they work with HAARP. Those two things go together. And I have the chemtrails and HAARP expose, and the other one I have is on the AIDS tonight, if you want to sign on for that, because I have the actual congressional record that goes right through asking for the funding for an immune deficiency virus. I have it from 1969. So those two things, at the end of the class, I will put 2 papers out again. You don't have to pay tonight, but whoever signs on, I'll pick it up next class, and you'll have them, okay, before the end of the course. So 40,000 people dead again. 2 weeks after the Pakistani government says that. And remember, bam, in Iran, about 2 or 3 years ago, when Bush wanted to go into Iran claiming they had nuclear weapons, the Iran government said, come on in, look at everything we have, come in, send the inspectors, the UN, whatever. Within a week, 40,000 were dead in the city of Bam from an earthquake. I'm a coincidence theorist. And we have to realize that there are weather wars going on. There are at the moment and for quite a while. And of course, I told you about the bill coming through Congress. It's supposed to have gone through October 1. This bill is to set up a weather modification, a bill to set up a weather modification department in the U.S. government. So now they're actually coming out and saying, yeah, we do that. And when Indonesia had all those forest fires and the whole continent was covered with smoke, Russia was on the news again, CBC. Russia offered them a typhoon. We'll give you a typhoon. It'll blow the smoke off all of Indonesia. And Indonesia said, no thanks. But the fact was, Russia said, we can manufacture a typhoon. So yes, weather wars are going on. Now here locally, talking about the citizen lab rat here, if it's not mutated food, it's no food. You can have no food. That's another thing they do. So the OCAP, the brilliant OCAP people, whom I admire greatly, because they actually are activists, and they do actually put their bodies on the front line. They had a big thing in Queen's Park. Did anybody go to it? Where they were making food, and it was all about that little known law in Ontario that says that if you are on welfare or some kind of benefits and you are disabled or whatever, you can get a special diet supplement. You can get some kind of a diet supplement to help you out, to buy decent food. So John Clark, these people went and the doctors were helping them. The doctors had tents in the park. They've signed up thousands of people under this bill. So the government's just reeling under the impact. Oh my God, they're actually taking it seriously. We're going to have to shell out this money now because people on welfare, that's why so many of them, you think, oh, they're okay, look, they're not thin. No, but if you eat cheap and bad food, you're more likely to get bloated or toxic bloat or whatever. That doesn't mean they're eating properly because a lot of these people are heavy. So anyway, this is what they're doing now. And you know what? They have thousands signed up now for this little bit of extra food money. So John Clark is probably the one true blue activist. I'm not a Marxist, he is, but I don't give a damn. I think if we're all after justice, who cares, you know, what we're going to call ourselves. So now here's another one. The military has a new job for the Marines. They're chem bio canaries, you know, like the canary in the mine, the coal mine. You send the canary out. If the canary dies, then, you know, put on the mask. That's what they're doing with soldiers now. And they said that they just pick at random, I think, unless maybe there's a guy you don't like. You'll go with the 3 or 4 ahead to see if there's gas or any kind of bioweapon released. And what they're going to do is, these men won't have any weapons, because one of the guys says, no, I'm not going with the gun. I'm not going out, no. So they're not allowed to have weapons. They're going to go out in front, and they're going to take off their masks so that everybody else knows. So they're going to be sacrifices right off the bat. And this is what they're doing now. So if you join the Army in the States, yeah, you could be picked to be one of these military canaries. But you're going out there tough, or some guy in the barracks doesn't like you, we'll sign up these 3. I mean, you know, they've been hassling us about something, let's sign them up. That'll what will be going on, because people in charge, they don't have to tell you why they did something, especially not in the army, you know. So that's what's going to be happening. So now, convertible, yellow, bright blue, whatever, all these wonderful designs of cars, you know, before people really clicked into what was happening. And the worst thing, how long's it been since you've heard me? Is it recently? Okay, I will try and project a little more. Anyway, in the graffiti time that I was in, the worst thing you could do to anybody, and he would have had to have done something terrible to you, the idea was you put sugar in his gas tank. When you put sugar in the gas tank, within minutes of starting up the car and the car's rolling, every joint, piston, part stops, seizes up the granulation of the sugar. You would have to take the whole engine out, brand new engine, everything would be ruined by a half a cup of sugar. Any moving part seized. That's what sugar does to your body, your joints. So people who have arthritis or think they're getting it or whatever, please, no flour, no sugars. If you have to go on, you can have fruit, but stay away. And I don't care if it's organic sugar, sugar is sugar. So that's one of the things that sugar and flour do to you.
You mean flour?
I mean any kind of flour. If you have a predisposition, you will get arthritis if you are eating breads, cakes, pies, doesn't matter organic or not, okay? Flour's flour. Once a plant has been turned into flour, your body treats it as if it is sugar. So, not everything organic you want to eat. Just think of all the organic things you see out there, especially when people walk their dogs. You don't want to eat that. It is organic, but it doesn't mean it's going to help you. So stay away from the sugars, organic or not, and things made with flour. And if you've got arthritis and you start doing that now, you should find that it gets a little better. And go on to the olive oil is excellent for joints, you know? So yes, your oils are excellent for that. Like if you put oil, it won't squeak anymore. That will work, it'll go. It's the same in the body. So that's what you have to do with it. So what we have to remember now, we'll go on to the eugenics after this. So as I say, as far as the news goes, remember this. This is my own statement here, so you can blame it on me. The news is like a bad circumcision. It's always on the bias. Remember that, okay? So everything. Now, we're going to start with eugenics. In 1932, Prescott Bush convened the first international conference on eugenics. Prescott Bush. Well, the great-grandfather of Georgie. So he convened in 32 that conference on eugenics, and in 33 they invited Hitler to come over to a convention, sign on. He didn't have time, he was much too busy at the Reichstag or whatever, but he couldn't come over, but they invited him. And in that same year, in 1932, they also started that syphilis experiment in Tuskegee on all those black men, that they gave them placebos while they told them for years that they were curing them of syphilis, and they watched them die, and they made notes on it over those years. They wanted to find out how long they would last with this. So that's what they did. Then, and as I said, I have these papers tonight, and between 69 and 78, the Africans were given the smallpox vaccine, and we know what was in it. They did not get it from the green monkey or any other monkey. No, not the AIDS, no. And at the same time, they actually gave it to a gay community in New York, but it's over 1,000 men, by giving them, I've got it here, the hepatitis B vaccine. And they were funded, I'll show you the document, that's the Chemtrails one, and they were funded, here's the date, June the 9th, 1969, House of Representatives. This is the document here where they asked for the funding and how they described what they were going to fund with it. So I have that, and you can order that tonight. That's what they did. So they got 10 million in '69 from Congress to fund a virus that your immune system had no weapons against. That was the whole gist of the meeting, and it's all there. So all these books written about, because they were, having too much sex and all that, well, if that were the case, we wouldn't have a population on the earth today. No, it was given to them in a smallpox vaccine. So vaccines now are being pushed. But especially with nanotechnology, there's a sheet down there on the nanotechnology, you don't know what you're getting in a vaccine. You do not know what else that vaccine is carrying. That's all I'm saying. So now this bird flu, the so-called pandemic, let's get everybody scared, all the scare tactics again, so everybody will rush out and get a vaccine. You see? That's what's happening. So it started out with the eugenics. Now, here, and I thought I'd show you, I didn't even want to do enough for the whole class, but this here, if you want to come up later, this is how the children are looking who are being born from depleted uranium. Some have extra limbs, some have no limbs, and this happened in Kosovo as well, depleted uranium. So the inhabitants of both these places, it's not going to be it's not even a clean death. You're going to have to watch your children being born totally disfigured and deformed. And God knows what's going to happen in the future. But so they can't even, and the Iraqis, this is evil. They can't even give them a clean death, a quick death. No, they first have to watch their children dying, being born, living a few days, looking like this, or worse. I have worse pictures. Oh, I can bring worse ones in Technicolor, but you wouldn't want to see them. So, this is what's going on. It's gratuitous torture, murder, and I don't know what to call this kind of thing. There's no name low enough for this kind of thing that they do. And the American soldiers coming home, of course, are passing these illnesses on to their families because they're getting the depleted uranium. Do you think we'll ever hear about any of those? There's 11,000 now who went to Iraq the first time who are dead, gone. Nobody helped them, and the rest are all severely debilitated. So they don't even, their own people mean nothing to them. They're just cannon fodder. This is, I found this little map the other day of Plum Island. Now, there is a paper on Plum Island down there, and we all know what Plum Island's about, and let's just hope that those people who live in the Hamptons, paying $10 million for their estate, they're just down the road from Plum Island. Well, I would not be bloody paying that kind of money to live in the Hamptons next to that. I can tell you, but that's where they are. And Plum Island has all kinds of, it's like the island of Dr. Moreau. Trust me. So, and then this other one, now this came out when SARS was big. I did this article, and I had it all backed up by the Lancet, the New York Times, Virology, all these doctors I had quoted in here. The source of SARS was not, it was American labs in China. 2 American labs in that province, purposely or not, let it leak out. It was another man-made virus. SARS. And remember what they told us about SARS? And the whole world thought we were like stumbling around the streets with a plague here because the CNN gets their hands on anything like that. The same thing with the bird flu. And they just romp it up into this huge, Paula Zan shouldn't be let out without a keeper, that woman. No.
Cindy, one of those corporations is Monsanto, and they're also
Yes.
genetically modified
Right.
in Canada.
Right.
The other corporation's Prodigy. And
That's right. It's all in here. Yep. It's all in here. Oh, and about this article, I took it to the SARS Commission, all right? It was in my paper. It was in the paper. Took it to the SARS Commission, gave it to all the media sitting along with their little booths. I was told to take these out of the room when I was there. Take these out. You see?
Can we get that from Discourse and Disclosures?
Yes. Well, yeah, if you get one of the old issues, or you can get it from me. I mean, you know. But the point is, I was told, take these out of the room. I said, no, I'm not. So I went back in. They didn't take my coat that time because it was summer. I went back in, and I took them all along, put them down beside the booths. I said, please, at least read it over the air, something, take it back to your station. No, they were warned. They didn't go out of the room with those articles, and that was backed up. Now, way back when, the Japanese I'm talking about here, they made a deal. We all know that Truman knew before they dropped the bombs that Hirohito had already made a deal with Truman, okay? That they had surrendered. They had surrendered by phone, whatever. But they didn't let it out. The Americans didn't let it out. They wanted to test the bomb and they wanted to scare Russia. So they used the bomb. They dropped another one, the Trinity, in the ocean. And the other two were little boy, fat man and little boy. The first one was Trinity. So when it was all over, as they did with the Nazis, they brought all the bioweapon people back from Japan. That was the deal. They said to Hirohito, you can still be emperor, but we want these guys. And so they all went back to the States, and along with the ones that Kissinger brought back in Operation Paperclip, all the von Braun, and not just von Braun, the rocket crowd, but all these bioweapon people as well, they all came to the United States. And Bechtel and all those people got the money for urban renewal of, the two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That was all urban renewal. Dresden, Dusseldorf. They were all civilians bombed to hell with fire bombs. That was all urban renewal. Bechtel's been around all these years. Urban renewal is the name of the game, and that's the same in New Orleans. I told you, that's urban renewal. We want to drain the swamp. This is the term they use. All those poor blacks are there. They're all on welfare. We want to drain the swamp, get them out. If you think those people are ever going to be back in that area, forget it. No, they aren't. They'll be up with, what's his name, Stronach and his little village. He's going to drag them up north of New Orleans there and have all his own feudal system with his own factory workers. They're not going to get back into their homes. Their homes are gone. The middle class homes aren't gone. It was just that area. So now they've done what they were going to do. So this is what happens. Now, before I get to the board and really depress you with all these things that your immune system is going to cope with, we'll just say something about the human genome. Now, the Genome Project. What's going to happen in the future when they know, and the genome, once they've discovered the markers for this disease and that disease, they all have markers, okay? So in the future, with the genome, this is what, especially health insurance, they're going to look up your marker. Everybody will have their markers done. Markers, and they show what disease will happen to you later in the genome. So once they know that, certain people, when you apply for life insurance, health insurance, whatever, if they see a marker in your genome that says you're going to get some disease that could be chronic or could go on for years, they won't even accept you. Everything they discover goes either into the military or profit or other profits. So that's the thing about the genome. They can find out now, if you wanted a huge policy or something, they can take your DNA and they can say to you, well, you have a marker for such and such, it's chronic, it could go on for years. No, or you'll have to pay huge, huge premiums, because they will know now exactly what's in store for you in later life. Now, that doesn't mean it's dead on and that it could happen, because if you go into a health kick, maybe it won't happen. But even if they just see the marker there, and you say, well, I take care of myself, I don't think it will come to that with me, they won't care. They'll either jack up the premiums or you won't even get an insurance policy. So that's what the genome is going to be used for, to just cut out those people that are going to cost them money. Now, on to this. Here I have a little picture. You can't see the little man, and I'm not good at drawing, but there he is. He's lying there. He can't get up because it's so bad. And I just call him Citizen Lab Rat because that's what he is. So here's what we have to cope with. Now, next week, debt is the biggest depopulator, of course. So next week, we're going to do a whole class on debt, and you will have read this book by then, The Illusion of Freedom. Once you read that, you'll be prepared for next week. So next week, we're going to be doing debt, and after that, war. Because the kind of money system we have requires war, constant wars. Or the money system, the scheme, the financial scheme will fail. They don't tell you that in university, but it will. Without wars, it's a game of musical chairs, so without a lot of people dropping off the end, the system must keep the population down at all times or the system will not survive. So they don't care about you. What they want to survive is the system. So we've done the weather wars, and they've got that new bill. They're admitting now that they actually do that. So we've got that. And we've got, we talked about BAM. We've got the eugenics. The eugenics, the markers come under eugenics. Because in 32, they were already sterilizing people they thought were incompetent. Oh yes, long before Hitler thought of anything like that. They were sterilizing people in the United States with Rockefeller's setup. His money set that up. And Rockefeller, he has the biggest HMOs. It's a Rockefeller system in the United States, the HMOs and the health insurance. It all comes under eugenics, and this is part of that, so that they don't even have to pay a dime for you. And back then, anyone they thought was incompetent, and they were experimenting not just on this group of black people with the syphilis and all that. They were doing that all over because the eugenics was really big, and it still is really big, but they don't talk about it anymore. So, pardon?
Not politically correct.
Oh yeah, no, politically correct, or you could lose your job, that's right. Everybody has to be politically correct. The reporters keep their mouths shut. You don't have to censor them at all. So, we'll go on from there. We've got the weather, and the chemtrails and the HAARP. After I do all the usual things, all the stuff that's going into your body, we'll do the HAARP. These are connected, these two. So we'll do those. So I told you can't have any fish. So we've got contaminated food, dangerous food, cancer-causing food. And cancer is the biggest business there is. Well, they give all the marches, and these people are giving money and all of this. It's a huge industry, and nobody will ever say to you, cancer is an environmental disease. They don't need all that money for research. That is a lie. What they need money for is cleaning up the pollution we already have, cleaning up the filthy water, taking away the pesticides. From somebody wants a nice lawn. They're still doing that in Toronto, even though they passed the law, because the fine's only $200. So all these companies, these ones that contaminate the food, even the ones that have been warned that they're going to be fined, the fines are considered part of overhead. The fines are not high enough to stop them. So the fines are worked into the business as part of the overhead. That's all they consider the fines to be. So it doesn't work. You have to really hit them much harder, but nobody ever does, because this is a corporate totalitarian state. That's what it's been for some years now. Corporate totalitarian. And these people that sell these contaminated vegetables, and the ones that are now going to try and get into the organic business with synthetics in the food, they don't eat the stuff they sell, no. One huge company, they had their own little organic vegetable garden behind their mansion. Their own garden. They weren't eating the slop they were selling. So this is what goes on. So you've got the contaminated food. See, and when you talk to them about levels, okay, isn't this, they'll say they raise the levels all the time. As soon as it gets worse, they raise the level. Oh, it's okay, it's still under the level, because they keep raising the levels that will be tolerated, and they don't talk about, but what about the combination of all these poisons? You're just talking about one here. This is okay, because you're only getting so many parts per million, but as I go through the day, I'm getting so many parts per million in the air, in the water, in my food. Then I'm getting maybe a prescription something or other, you know. So how that adds up into my body at the end of the day is what I have to think about. So corporate people are psychopathic. The psychopath has the personality that's best suited to survival because he has no scruples. And this is why they can do what they do. So they have contaminated food, even baby food, they don't care. And then they have mutated food along with contaminated. And in some foods, it's both contaminated and mutated. So they're in there together. So when you go to the supermarket now, if you have time, I want you to read. Read if something's in a box, read what's in your cereal, read where sugar comes in the list of ingredients. It'll be up high, let me tell you, up near the top. So check all your cereals, or you'll just be downing a lot of sugar. Carrots hold more pesticide than any other root vegetable. Celery's so bad they have to wear rubber gloves or they get ulcers on their hands. So there's certain things you must not eat, okay? So the mutated food comes with the terminator seeds, and they're named correctly because you will also terminate a lot more earlier along with the seed. You might last as long as the seed, maybe. And then they have the pesticides on everything, and you will never hear, when you hear all these wonderful cooking shows, diet shows, Slim and Trim, eat salads, do they ever say make sure it's organic? No, they don't. They're told not to mention that, and they don't mention it. But I'll tell you now that all these toxics that are in your food, that's where a lot of the fat comes from, because your body, in order to survive, you're eating food and it's got a lot of toxic stuff in it, your body shunts the toxic there. It shunts it where the fat is in your body to protect your organs. So if you eat organic food, you will naturally lose weight. But if you don't eat it, the toxics, you will get heavier, and the toxics, these pesticides, where did they come from? Germany. They had all these poisons left over, and they figured at the end of the war they had barrels and thousands of barrels, and they said, hey, if it kills people, it could kill bugs. Brilliant. So they brought it all to the States. And after the Second World War, that's when we started having the pesticide influx. And they said to the farmers, now you've got to use the pesticides because the farmers were losing 1/3 of their crops every year to bugs. So the farmers thought this is a great idea. Now after 50 years, the pesticides, they're all in the oceans, they're in wells, along with the pharmaceuticals. This earth is saturated after 50 years with pesticides. And of course, they're killing the mammals in the ocean. After 50 years of that, guess how much of their crops the farmers lose? 1/3. After 50 years of soaking the planet in this, the farmers still lose 1/3 of their crops. Why? Simple. Because a bug can have 30 generations between now and next Christmas, and he will become immune to those pesticides. So more and more and more pesticides are piled in there because the bugs are becoming immune. We aren't, though. We are not. Do you see what they've done now to us? And they're in everything and on everything.
I have a quick question. I was in Europe a few years ago, right? And I ordered a red snapper. So my cousin goes to me, you shouldn't be eating those because they're coming from fish farms.
Oh,
These red snappers.
yeah,
And that same summer, I did see some fish farms there.
yeah.
So how do you know what to eat fresh fish and what?
Well, when you go to the market here, you say, is that salmon wild? They have to be honest. I ask it. No. If they say no, then it's from a farm. Do not eat it. Now, don't write it down until I get, because we've got a lot to get through, okay? So the pesticides, never ever, they are in a petroleum base. Oil, whatever. Pesticides are in a petroleum base. They never leave your system. You would have to go onto organic food, and you would have to cleanse somehow. But even then, a lot of these petroleum, based in petroleum, it will not leave. It just accumulates the pesticides. Meantime, the pests are immune. They have many generations, and the farmer is still losing 1/3 of his crop. So we've done the sugar one. Sugar is way up here. Sugar is just as bad as... And of course, George Bush's last statement a few weeks ago, we have to support the sugar industry. We have to keep the economy up. That's what I mean. They call an economy, that's a financial scheme. That's all it is. It's not an economy. Economy means you save, you don't waste, you don't poison people. But see, sugar is what oil is today. Sugar needed slaves for sugar back in those times when sugar was the big thing. So now oil is the big thing. So now oil, we need wars. And, we can't go on to anything renewable. So when they get the population down to 500 million, which is what they say they want, including Jacques Cousteau, Maurice Strong. I've interviewed Maurice Strong. He looks like the Pillsbury Doughboy, but never mind. And MSG, of course, is added on to this. MSG was shipped over after the war in boatloads, and it can cause convulsions. At the very least, it will cause headaches. And then, of course, the Alzheimer's. All the people all those years cooking in aluminum. They're still trying to say it has nothing to do with it, but I'm sorry, it has a lot to do with it. And of course, in the chemtrails now, there is aluminum. When we get to the chemtrails, I will write down what's in it. But aluminum is in it, in the chemtrails, and it's coming down on you. Okay? Then, of course, we had the vaccines. We did that part of that last week. The vaccines, there's now about 14,000 children in the United States that are completely debilitated or dead from the shock of a vaccine. And nobody discusses that at all. So Catherine Diodati wrote a book, and she has a website. You can probably get it under, if you just go Diodati. This is her name here. Diodati. She's written a book on it because her daughter was completely debilitated, is now in a wheelchair from a vaccine she shouldn't have had. And of course, from the vaccines, we're going to have the whole board list here. We go to the flus. Now, SARS was man-made. The AIDS was man-made. The bird flu, they're trying to scare everybody about it because I think they're still trying to work the bird flu so that it can cross. And until they do that, they're going to keep the scare things going up, up, and up. with the bird flu. And remember, with the bird flu, these people over there had to kill off millions of their food supply. They had to kill off the food supply. So it was like the mad cow, where in Britain they had to, you know, cows were going up in smoke with the prion. So that's another thing, the prion, nothing kills the prion. It was a word invented by the guy who said, you know, this is coming from the protein, but there's a lot of controversy on that now because they don't believe that it was a protein that caused the mad cow. A lot of the scientists think that it was a virus that caused the mad cow. That's the stage they're at now, okay? So the first guy who got the Nobel Prize or whatever he got, he shouldn't have gotten it because there was no proof at that time that it absolutely was the prion. So now they're still saying, half the scientists are still saying, no, it could have been another virus. So we're left with that. Then we talked about the depleted uranium. Now we have background radiation. Now you have 2 pages in those handouts by Helen Caldicott. It's frightening. I went to that when she was at OIC last fall. There was no publicity. She only had about 200 people there. Nobody wanted to know that she was in town. And she was telling all about what's happening with the background radiation, and that's where all the children are getting the brain cancers now because children are so vulnerable to toxics, to radiations. They are more than we are because their immune systems are not developed. That goes together. Not developed till they're about 6. They have to go through a certain number of flus and little childhood things, and each time they go through one, they come out of it, their immune system gets stronger. That's why you can't give shots to little babies and little children. Their immune system has to develop. So they're the most vulnerable, and they're all getting brain cancers from background radiation. Not only that, the background radiation, but any children especially who are living near the ELFs, you know, those huge conductors, the electricity, anywhere, they should be miles away from those because they're getting leukemia. All the kids that live near the electromagnetic, okay? And we're surrounded by all kinds of magnetisms and electro this and that, and you've got your satellites on the building for the cell phones. Oh yeah, the cell phone. Where's the poor guy here? So you're getting the tumors from the cell phones as well. People don't care. They're all walking down the streets now. You think they've all gone mad because you can't see the little phone. They're all mumbling, walking along. You're thinking, oh my God, you know, what's happened to the population? So they look like they've all gone crazy. So you're getting these from the cell phones. And I don't want to miss anything here now. So, and then of course you've got the industrial toxins, which are flowing into the rivers and going out in the air at all times. And this is why 1,800 are dying every year here. And you've got the cars. Now, 2 cities in Europe have verboten the cars. So you have to leave your car when you come into the city at one of those parking lots. You can't bring, there's 2 cities in Europe, and I think one's in Germany. There's another one where cars are just forbidden. You cannot bring cars in there. So people can actually walk around and breathe the air. So, and of course, you can have a car that runs without gasoline. We all know that. You can do it with hydrogen or ethanol, but they don't make enough profit. See, they have to work on that, and they have to do research to make those cars. So the industrial toxins are out there every day. So what happens is, plus you now have the fast foods in the kids' schools. When I went to school, at public school, my mother was working in the day, and she paid once a week or something. I had a hot meal at the school in the middle of the day. It was her real food. You know, food, actually mashed potatoes, something, blah, blah. This was a hot dinner. And now the kids, fries, burgers, grease, fat. By the time they're 18, their arteries are like cement. Now this is what they have in the schools now. So children growing up, I mean, children suffer more than anybody else. So you've got this junk food, which the kids are eating in the schools, and then they come home, both parents are out working because nobody can afford to stay home anymore. You've both got to be working to support the home, because homes are 10 times what they used to be in 1970. You can't, I mean, all you hand to your children is a mortgage. Mortgage means death grip. That's what it means, mortgage, death grip. So that's what you have left now to give to your children. So they're out working all day, so the kids, junk food. Now they're saying to the schools, the kids need an hour of exercise, but somehow this isn't going to be done either because, I don't know, what's the problem? Teachers, what? They can't have the hour of exercise and they're eating this. And they've already announced, they announced the other day, they said, your children will not live as long as you because they don't get any exercise. But they didn't add all the rest, because when my mother grew up on organic food. There was organic food till after the Second World War, till we got the pesticides. So, I mean, am I going to live to be 85 like my mother? I don't know, because she had 50 years of real food without toxic waste in her system. So we are lab rats. And all we are now, we're consumers. Even in health, we're not patients, we're consumers. So as long as in the corporate world, as long as we are working and consuming, that's fine. We can stay here then. But once we get older, say that we're retired, we're on a pension, we're not a consumer anymore. Hey, now let's bring that bill in about that euthanasia there. You see? No, I'm serious. You are a consumer. That's what you are now. And when you haven't got enough money and you're not working, you're not consuming, then you can be let go at any time. Like this guy that said, let's give the kids the vaccine, so the most vulnerable are the ones that are going to be weeded out because they're not consuming anyway. So we can just weed them out. And what we'll do is we'll start with, so just so that it won't backfire on us right away, we'll start with all the countries and the people that aren't white. We'll start with them because nobody gives a damn how many of them died. This is, if you were a fly on the wall listening in these meetings, this is what you would hear. And they can't be consumers. So they don't know if this is true or not, and they're still fighting over that. So what happens is, they said cancer is much worse now. Okay, after all the years, how many years have they been running so many miles, getting all kinds of grants, everybody donating billions and billions for research, but no stopping of the pesticides, okay? There are organic means of keeping plants from being eaten. No cleaning up of the water. Look at Walkerton. Everything, and when you do buy water, it's in a plastic bottle. Plastic. Plastics. Now, there's so much plastic in the water now. This is true. You may not believe this, but it is true. That they have already announced that because these plastics take the place of estrogen, men are getting huge amounts of estrogen just from the tap water, and that all the men from now on were going to be born with much smaller pee-pees. I'm telling you the truth. So this is going to depopulate. In future, it might take 10 guys to get together enough to impregnate one woman. So instead of the other way with the harem, we'll have to have polyandry like they did in Tibet, where the woman married the guy and all his brothers. You see what I'm saying? So this is what's happening. So anyhow, yes, the plastic.
Enjoy this while you can.
Yes, right. It's true. So what happens with the cancer? Is this going to, oh, I can't get this down again, okay. If I do this, will it come down? Oh, my brush is gone. There's 3 boards here. But I want you to see the other board. So, okay, somebody come and do this for me. Somebody, just so I can put that one on top and this one, and still have one down below. I haven't got any strength in my hands. Thank you. Yeah, and no, I want to see that one, so just pull down this, yeah. Will it come down? Oh God, it's an old one, isn't it? So what happens now? After all this research, more and more people are getting cancer. More and more women are getting breast cancer. So what are they doing with the money that they're saying, no, it's the industry. They don't need any more research at all. What they need is to just clean up the environment. And do you know how many thousands, maybe millions of jobs that would create? Cleaning up what we've already turned into crap. So it's a huge racket, the cancer industry. Then, when the chemicals in your food and the water give you a cancer, what do you have to do? You have to go back to the cancer industry for what? Chemotherapy. Okay? So they get you coming and going. So that's why the industry is thriving, and that's why not one of these people, I don't care if it's Hillary Weston or the new Governor General, they're all going to these big, the charity balls and all this. Not one of these people will say, we need to clean up the environment now. Women's breast milk is full of all kinds of pesticides. They said that years ago. But they said, still, use that because it also has immunities. But they warned the women. They said, anyone, it's full of it. So your baby from the very beginning is being poisoned. This is what they've done. So it's worse than murder because it's a long, drawn-out, sadistic killing of people, and watching and making money while it's happening, and then writing books about what they find out. They know damn well what they're doing. All this research for cancer. It's ridiculous. It's one of the biggest lies, and it's a huge, huge industry. So then, they make billions on these diseases. So as we said before, they've got the fast foods in the school. This is all corporate. This is all, the corporations, they're making billions and billions and billions on killing off people slowly, watching them. We are lab rats, I'm sorry. When you go out in the morning and you're walking along the street and this exhaust is pouring out into your face, and people are sitting there idling, and then you see all these cars with just one person in the car. One woman said to me once, I can't go on the subway. I have to have the privacy of my car. I said, yeah, well, you'll have the privacy of your grave, too. Probably a lot earlier, you know. So we did the iatrogenic diseases last time. Iatrogenic means doctor-caused. We did that 2 weeks ago. All the doctor-caused diseases, thousands, that you have to cope with. So you see, your health really, you have to be responsible. You have to get second opinions. You have to watch what you eat. Your body's the only thing between you and eternity. So you have to take care of it. So you just don't let them. Don't ever, this is my motto. At the Loblaws, when I asked for something organic, he said, we don't have them this week. We have those, though. I said, I'm not going to pay anyone to give me cancer. Thank you. And so I said, I'll wait till you get the organic ones in. So, and I keep saying that. So sooner or later, it's going to get through their heads, you know. So, have I covered everything? Yes, we did the prescribed drugs. Oh, yes, the aluminum and then the Teflon. You can't use Teflon, please. No, don't use the non-stick Teflon. Very bad. Throw it out. Just get the old iron frying pan, put a little oil on it, and you'll actually get iron in your food. If you cook in an iron soup pot, the iron will actually go into your soup. It'll be like having liver or something. So you know, it'll give you that. And then, of course, the nanotechnology, before I get to the chemtrails and the HAARP, these are just, these are things that go into your body and you have to deal with them every day. The chemtrails and the HAARP, they are dropped down on you from the sky. And the nanotechnology, now a nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter. That's where you get the word nanotechnology. Now that is the scariest one of all. I'm saving that to the end because they're in the midst now of getting that one rolling. But that's a really scary one. So we'll go on now to the chemtrails. Now when I have witnessed these, I had a place in Florida when I was working at the UN. I thought, well, I'd like to get down there in the winter, and I was working on contracts so I could get away when I wanted. So I bought this house in '79. It was about, I don't know, 500 feet from the water or something, and near St. Pete. And I sold it in '99 because after '99, everything kind of, I don't think I like the neighborhood. I'm going to go now. But anyway, when I had the house, I no sooner got down there that year, I think it was around 98, 97, 98, 99 in there, when on the radio they were saying the hospital emergency wards were filled with people. That was like they all had this terrible flu, they couldn't breathe, they were coughing, they didn't know what was happening. They said, don't go to the hospitals, they're all filled, all the emergency wards are filled. So I went out the next day, and then, of course, way back then, I used to listen to Art Bell because I'm a night owl. So I listened to his show down there, and he started talking about these chemtrails things and what was happening. And I went out the next morning, and I saw them. And from my house, all the houses usually are on one floor, but so it would be about 12 feet. And then there was a tree over here in the backyard, and I came out, and there was this strand. It looked like a big spider web, but it was, you could see it was wet. It was like gluey. And so it was one big strand came right from the roof, right across to the tree, like it was a clothesline or something. And I went up to it, and I touched it. And I went in and washed off what I had touched. But it looked like just a viscous. It wasn't like water. It was like a strand, a very thin strand, but it could stretch. And it was, because they have polymers in them. Polymers are in them. And it looked like it could stretch, and it went right over to the tree. So then I started listening more, and people were still in hospital for days, maybe weeks, but they didn't say anything about, on the news, about like what it could be. But only on the Art Bell show, people were phoning in and saying, well, I live way out here, and my windshield is covered with this gluey stuff, and people would be phoning in talking about all this gluey stuff that was covering everything, and that's what was coming down. So the chemtrails were already coming down there, and even in Canada, there's a place in Quebec, or near Ottawa, where the Ojibwe, it's a town. What is it, Osceola? No, it sounds like Espanola. And they all went to Ottawa. They marched on Ottawa because they were being sprayed, like I think it was March '99. And they were all getting sick, and so they marched on Ottawa, and Ottawa said, we're not spraying anybody. To this day, the government has not admitted, not one government has admitted that there's anything coming down, although people have taken them, all the stuff's there, what's in them, the labs have analyzed all this, and they've told you what's in them. There's viruses in them, there's things that cause heart problems, there's everything. In fact, I can tell you what's in it right now. Look, I've got the list. This is what's in Chemtrails, and if you get that book, you'll have it all in there. It's amazing. Now, chemtrails. This is what is inside the chemtrail. And I don't know what all these things mean. Pseudomonas aeruginosa, okay? Fluorescens bacillus, now we know what bacillus is, streptomyces, well that's strep throat. I can't even pronounce some of this. Enterobacter cloaca, that would be you'd have something wrong in your bowels. It's got human white blood cells. It's got other bacilli and molds capable of producing heart disease and meningitis, as well as acute upper respiratory and gastrointestinal distress. And fungus is in there as well. The places sprayed to this date when I had this were the US, Britain, Australia, Canada, particularly Espanola, they've got it in here, and Bell River, Ontario. Espanola, a small town 50 miles west of Sudbury, demanded an end to the spraying. The Ojibwe people were seriously ill. Over a 50-mile area, this is what they sprayed. A 50-mile area was sprayed by a C-130 aircraft. That began in March 1999. Rainwater contained carbon chaff, which is highly toxic to the lungs. Now, they have been doing this since 1999, and they have been doing it all over. And they have found more viruses, and they also know now that there is aluminum in some of this. And nobody is telling them. They've taken this to the labs. And Thomas's, this is an update. Thomas actually, the first book he wrote was called Bringing the War Home. And it was about this, the chemtrails. Then he came and he talked here about 4 years ago, and I think I paid $25 for this. This was an update on what was all, but it's all in here. And I told him what I was going to do with it, and he said, yes, go ahead. But anyway, they have been doing this the whole time, and they will not admit. You can't even get one government to say, yes, we did that. Even though these analyses have been taken to them. All kinds of witnesses, books have been written on it. 2 books now, 2 that I know of. This one, 2 more. They still will not admit, yes, we are doing that. And they're still doing it. In fact, some people in the class said, look out there today when you come in, they're up there. Especially, you can go out, like last week, there was one day where the sky was totally clear, completely blue, not a sign. And I don't know where I was, maybe down at the market or something, and I look up and all of a sudden you see these long stripes like this, sometimes X's. Now the X's, as I've said, are marks that the planes put there. It's information, in other words, something about that spot where the X is, all right? They do that, but we will never know why. Now, I'm telling you, a regular contrail from a plane, it dissipates within minutes. A regular contrail that comes out the back of a plane, well, you won't even see any part of it. And 2 minutes later, it's gone. It's like steam. It disappears. Chemtrails, they will be there for hours, maybe the whole day. And they might be 3 lines at first, but then you'll see the lines widen out. And they become a fog bank. And you see the bank, the lines widen, and the bank comes down. That's a chemtrail. A contrail, you can watch it, it'll go within minutes. Not a chemtrail, because it's loaded with these things that are in it. And they are coming down on you. So the Army has been spraying other things. Back in the 50s, they asked, the states asked if they could spray Winnipeg, city of Winnipeg, and then whoever was there said, yeah, okay, do it. I mean, this is not new. People have been sprayed, whole cities have been sprayed. And then notes are taken about what happens, how many are ill, what happens to the people after. Yes, it's been going on, at least since the war. Now the HAARP is called, I've got it here, where's my little, this is why they call it HAARP. It's the high altitude auroral, you know, like the aurora borealis, auroral research project. That's HAARP. Now, when they first started building it, the governor of Alaska was Mr. Begich. Nick Begich, his son, wrote a book called Angels Don't Play This Harp. But when his father first started telling people about it, he got lost in a small plane. They never found him. They still don't know where he is today. Nick Begich's father, who was governor of Alaska, and objected to this thing going up and wanted to know what it was and what was going on. Well, he disappeared. He hasn't been found since. And Nick Begich wrote the book, Angels, I'll just mark it here, you can ask for it. I'm not sure if it's in the library or not. Angels Don't Play This Harp. And that goes right into it completely. And then the second one by Jerry Smith I have is called HAARP, the Ultimate Weapon. So I have that. You can get that one as well. And HAARP is involved with the chemtrails, as you will find out if you get this one here by William Thomas. So this is what it is. Now it's about, say you've got a field here like this, and they can make it as big as they want. It's got, these are all transmitters throughout the field. They can have hundreds. And this can go up to something like 500 million volts or something. So with this machine, what they do is, it's at the top of the globe. It's right here, up in the Arctic. So say that over here, there's a fault line or something. They're telling everybody, this is so that we can see underground bunkers, enemy. But this thing puts out ELFs. The frequencies that come out of this thing could rip the planet apart, literally rip it apart. If they put the power through this, that could go through it. We wouldn't be here. So there it is at the top of the earth. So say that there's a fault line here. This is about weather wars. There's a fault line here. They can send the ELF right through the earth, direct it where they want it to come out. When it comes out, it's 1,000 times more powerful as when it went in. And HAARP, if that is a fault line there, it can trigger an earthquake. If they put it down in water, and there's a fault line under the ocean, it can trigger a tsunami.
Oh.
Yeah, that's exactly. And all they're saying to people is, this is to find underground bunkers. You don't need to do that to find an underground bunker. I mean, you can go up to Ararat and find the bloody ark with it sees down like an X-ray. So they don't need all this ultra-high frequency to find any bunkers. But that's what's happening. These frequencies, this thing is so powerful, and they're adding to it that it could literally take the planet apart. If they were to put this to its full power, it could take the planet apart, the HAARP. But that's what they're calling it, a research project. So this comes directly from Tesla. Tesla has 700 patents in the US. Bernard Eastland more or less stole, I'd say plagiarized, Tesla's work. And Bernard Eastland, and now I believe this is privately owned. This is privately owned, like NASA is privately owned. NASA is not, NASA doesn't have to tell us anything anymore. See, when something, that's another thing about corporations and privatization. As soon as something is privately owned, they don't have to tell you jack squat about what they're doing. Nothing. So that's a beautiful thing, yeah.
I heard recently, a couple weeks ago in an interview, that the Russians are about 2 generations ahead of the Americans in this thing.
In the HAARP? Yeah, maybe they are, yeah, because,
Technology.
yeah, because, well, they got up into space first, didn't they? Because they were able to hone in whatever they wanted to do, and just because it's a dictatorship, it's autocratic, if they decide to do something, they can do it right away. Nobody's going to stop them. They don't need bills or anything like that. Yeah?
You know where the energy is coming from?
The energy, it's like Tesla said. There is an aurora. This whole thing is a magnet, okay? The Earth is like a magnet. And everything is magnetized. In other words, We're never going to get out into the universe with this combustion fuel, okay? This is so stupid, primitive, silly. We're never going to get, we might get to the moon, big deal. What we have to use is the electromagnetics that are going on out there. The Earth is like a big magnet. This is all electromagnetic. So the power is coming. This is what Tesla said. This is what he said, and this is why they didn't fund him anymore. He said, you know what? I want to give people free electricity. Everyone can get electricity just out of the ground in their own backyard, and I'm going to show them how. What happened? J.P. Morgan took away his funding. They backed Edison. Tesla died a poor old man in a rundown New York hotel. His only thing left to do was feed the pigeons. But because he wanted to do something for humanity, he said, look, the electromagnetic, it's here. It's right in the ground. I know how to get it out. And he could take it out in the degrees he wanted it to come out. I mean, he wasn't about to blow the whole world up, even though they blame that huge, way up in Siberia there, that huge, the forests all burnt, there were only little stems left. They thought it was Tesla, that he made a mistake. Other people said, no, it was a meteor landed there, blah, blah. We don't know, but the point is, when he was doing all these experiments, and he was inviting people, and he was showing them, look at what I'm doing. Lightning was coming down. It was like the Frankenstein thing. Lightning was coming down. He was channeling that. Nobody got hurt. He knew what he was doing. He said, it's all out there. You don't need to pay for electricity. So they cut him off the funding. They backed Edison because Morgan and the bankers, of course, they wanted people to pay for everything. We can't have anything free like that. So they went, but then in the end, Eastland went through, everybody stole from him. But Marconi didn't invent wireless. Tesla worked for him, was working with him for a while. Tesla invented that. Marconi got the credit. I'm sorry. Wasn't Marconi? No. So 700 patents, and Bernard Eastland then decided he was going to put up this huge electromagnetic field. And now I think they're adding to it. So, of course, yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that, I forgot what year it was, but the Americans built a 40-ton or an 80-ton magnet that they sold to the Russians. And
I don't remember.
To do with the Philadelphia experiment.
Oh, that, yeah. Well, I don't want to go into that because I'm not really, I haven't got hard evidence about that. But I do have it about this, and so did Nick Begich, and he wrote the book on it. So anyway, this is what they do. They can instigate. I'm not saying that HAARP does the hurricane, no, but if there's a fault line and you plunge one of these into that fault line, and with those billions of volts into that fault line, yes, you are going to instigate something. And so they don't really care what. I mean, it could be earthquake, tsunami, whatever. At least huge groups of people will die. And after the 40,000 dead in BAM, they admitted that HAARP had been in use while BAM was happening, and right after that they shut HAARP down. So we don't know when it's up and running and when it's down. But God help us if they do anything, this is a research project. So this is part of the weather wars. This is definitely part of the weather wars, this here. Now we're going to get to the nanotechnology. This is all. But you might as well know what's happening. It's better than having your head in the sand. This way, you can protect yourself. You can start with your own body, the food. You can stay out of the way of a lot of other horrible things. And you can pass the information on to other people. Hopefully, see, all these handouts you get here. I hope you all have 3-ring binders. I hope you all fill them with these handouts and have your little sections and labels. And I hope that you're blathering all this to other people, or you're Xeroxing what you've got and handing it out in your neighborhood. Because I had a radio show on CIUT years ago called, God, I forget the name of it now, Undercurrents. And all the people like me who were handing out information like this, we were all locked out at this university here, locked right out of the building at CIUT. There was a huge fuss over it. I mean, all kinds, 4 or 5 others and me too. They said, we don't want your information anymore. So we were out. So I'm handing it out to you here, and what I'm saying is, I hope that you're handing it on to other people. Just keep your little book and your files in there. And now we'll get to the nanotechnology. You've got a sheet in the handouts, but I'll explain it briefly. I don't know all about it. This is from a guy that I quizzed yesterday when I came to the university, professor, sergeant, blah, blah. He filled the auditorium over at Med-Sci there. And so at the end I went up and I said, I want to ask you a few more questions. So he said, okay, and I did. So as I said, nano means 1/billionth. Okay, so nanotechnology is working with things that are so minute. Okay, they're within the DNA, but they're so minute. Now, what he's saying they're going to use them for is, here's another laugh. If you use nanotechnology, you can find a cancer when it's still really small. So they're doing it with mice. Still nothing from him about the environment, not a word. So you see, all of this is big business, and it makes jobs, it makes work. In the coming classes, you're going to find out that jobs are not where it's at, okay? You don't need a job to live. You need an income. There's a big difference. Life is not about the holy job, trust me. Anyway, nanotechnology, they work with things so small, but these are biological. They're part of DNA. And so it's a hell. So he said, we're going to find cancers better. Then we're going to get infrared, we'll have infrared glasses. It'll help us get that because this is what nanotechnology wants to do. Apparently, every day the sun sends down 10,000 times the energy that we actually use. 10,000 times the energy comes down to this planet through light and whatever than we need. So what nanotechnologists want to do is they want to get much more of that energy down here. Okay? So the sun is like a big, bomb. It keeps on going and going, nuclear fusion, whatever. They want to get as much of that energy from the sun as possible, and he's saying if we do that, we won't need oil, okay? We won't need oil. What we can do is we can have solar panels. We can even paint airplanes with this stuff, and they won't need fuel, because if we paint them with the little nanotechnology, we just paint that on, they won't need to refuel. They can go all day with energy from the sun, because these little nanoparticles, okay, they don't know what they are, so when they don't know, they just say particles. Nanoparticles will create energy from the sun, so that if you paint them on something, the plane, whatever, it can go without any kind of fuel. So, and these particles somehow will get the infrared from the sun as well, and you can paint it on a little chip, and you'll be able to see at night, and then we won't need oil, because somehow we'll get cars that run on nanos, whatever, and this is what will happen. So he said, though, somebody said, well, how do you get these little things, why do you paint them on? He said, well, this is what happens. You get them in some kind of liquid, like, say, they have a derivative of olive oil. And he said, you can take these little nanoparticles and you can choreograph them so that they form certain patterns that you want to form. And he said, or you can get some kind of a surface, like whatever kind of surface, as long as it's level all the way along, and you take these little particles and they're in a solution, and you can just drop them on the surface, And when they get on the surface, they self-organize. In other words, they will spread out evenly. They will self-organize. And he talked about this through the whole lecture, that they're going to self-organize. And then what you do is you can paint, you can get huge pieces like this floor, and you can paint them on a solution in this huge piece, put it on your roof, and you'll get all this energy. They're going to take this energy from the sun, so you won't need any heat or anything like that. Now, he didn't say how much, or he said right now we're only getting like 3 to 5% of the solar energy when we do one of these big slabs, but he said we're on the way, you know, we want to get at least 10%. So then he kept saying that they self-organize. Okay, so I said, well, then you're saying they're biological. They're biological. He said, yes. And they self-organize. So I said, well, I have another question. If they self-organize, do they self-replicate? He said, yes. He said, yes. So they self-replicate. Okay? And they're biological. So I said, okay, when you get them on this piece of whatever it is, how do you contain them? He said, well, it's like electrons. You can shorten or lengthen an electron depending on the box that you contain it in. So I said, so these nanos, these little billionth types who they self-organize and self-replicate, I said, and you don't know that much about them. I said, so tell me, later on, some way, are we going to need a vaccine against these? You know what he said? If we get the vaccine before they start replicating, they might not we could stop them replicating. So what is it they've got here? They're going to put, I said, so is it like photosynthesis? He said, yes, it is. I said, like a plant gets energy from the sun and then grows? Yes. So he said, in fact, one lab was using spinach to create, you know, taking the nanos from the spinach, okay? So it is like photosynthesis. So I said, well then, what if something happens and you're using all these and you've got them on slabs all over, and they decide they're going to self-replicate and they can form their own patterns? I said, what does that mean? And like somebody, well, my son actually was saying to me today, so are we going to be eating these? I said, no, they'll eat us. This is exactly what could happen. They could cover the whole earth like lichen covers a wall. They could actually not stay on those slabs, or how do they know they can contain them? So when I said to him, they're self-replicating, well, and I wasn't joking because it's a biological. Yes, he said, but if we get a vaccine, and they haven't even got them out there yet, they're still in the labs, they're still experimenting. If we get a vaccine, we could probably stop them from replicating. But I said, once they're out there, and they're soaking up all this extra energy, so that's the coming thing. Nanotechnology is big now. And so for the infrared cameras, and he did say with the plane, he said, and a remotely controlled, remotely driven plane, remotely controlled plane, he already had that in his vocabulary, wouldn't even need to refuel. He said, if you painted just the top of the plane, it could probably go half the day, but if you painted the bottom of the plane as well, it could probably fly around all day without having to refuel. So they tell you about these inconsequential benefits. This is what they do all the time. inconsequential benefits. And then when you say to him, well, I went up to him, I said, well, listen, I didn't hear anything about the downside here. I know there's going to be one. So I had a private talk with him. And that's when he admitted, yes, but if we find a vaccine. So no, we wouldn't be eating them. They would just be covering everything there is to cover. Just self-replicating.
Some people say there were remote-controlled planes, the planes that hit the World Trade Center in 911, some people say were remote-controlled.
They were. They were. Well, that's why I say it's already in his vocabulary. He said, for instance, he didn't say a plane. He said a remotely controlled plane could go all day if it was painted with these little nanoparticles. And they use DNA. DNA supposedly controls them. The DNA would control the nanoparticles. So they're really delving into...
Isn't this artificial intelligence?
What?
Artificial intelligence.
Well, no, this isn't artificial. This is biological intelligence. If they're self-organizing and self-replicating, there's a form of intelligence there. Nothing to do with a computer. Nothing at all. They're biological. Of course, nanotechnology is digging right into the DNA of the planet. Now, so you can put it this way. We have DNA in us, but essentially, the DNA is using us to keep on going. We harbor all the DNA. So now, if they let out these little nanoparticles, which you might say are the soldiers of the DNA, what if they decide they don't want to be contained? See, you could look at it both ways. We have DNA, we're alive, blah, blah, it's great. But inside, the DNA, of course, can be using us to stay alive, too. We are the host of the DNA. Yes, right. So that's what I wanted to explain. That's the most worrying one of all, because as usual, they're delving into something that they don't really know a lot about, and it's all going to be done with, like, the research. Everything is called a research project, you see? And we are the lab rats. Well, he is too, this guy. I mean, what if he's in this lab and, got some on my finger, you know? It could be like the bloody flesh-eating disease for all we know before, we get over it. So now, any questions at all that I can answer, or can I give out the books to the people who have bought the books? If the questions are very important, I'll take them. Otherwise, we've got to get on with the books.
How long have they been studying nanotechnology?
At least 10 years, maybe more. Yeah. So now let me read out the names. Wait.